And joining us now with more on this report is one of the authors, senior researcher at the Center for the Study of Contemporary European Jewry and academic director at the Erwin Kotler Institute, Dr. Carl Yonker. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So we all know, we all see and feel, of course, the rise of anti-Semitism around the world. But was there anything in this report that really stood out for you or even surprised you?
Well, one of the unique findings of our report was that the spike in anti-Semitic incidents occurred in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, in the first 3 months, October to December. And then in most of the countries, we see a massive decline or a decline throughout 2024. But at the end of the day, the levels of anti-Semitism in 2024 still exceed pre-2023, October 2023 levels. The biggest surprise that we saw, or the biggest rises that we saw, were in Australia and in Italy, two countries that experienced the largest rises. Australia experienced a threefold increase from 2022, and Italy experienced a twofold increase from 2022.
Interesting, and it's interesting actually because Australia and Italy, two different countries with different, let's say, governments. Can you explain that discrepancy? Sort of why Italy, why Australia?
Well, in Australia, there were thoughts that a lot of that there were outside actors perhaps driving the rise in anti-Semitic incidents or promoting acts of vandalism and violence and harassment in the community. Those are still under investigation. In Italy, you see a large drive in terms of anti-Israel activism, anti-Zionist activism that manifested in anti-Semitism in Italy.
And, there was one sentence in the report that really stood out for me. You say, and I'll read it, anti-Semitism has raised its most violent and ugly head when the state of Jews appeared most fragile, not when it appeared most defiant. Can you elaborate on this conclusion?
Exactly, that we saw a large increase and a huge spike right after October 7th, before Israel had started any sort of military action or any sort of engagement with Gaza. And in those first 3 months when Israel was facing, an existential crisis, existential threat, that was when incidents were at their height. And then as the war continued, throughout 2024, we saw a decline. It's still, again, at levels higher than in 2023 before October 7th, but nevertheless a decline.
Now, you also discuss in the report what is most needed to combat anti-Semitism. I think you write not pompous speeches or cocktail parties or award ceremonies with, Hollywood celebrities. So what is needed, in your view, to combat this phenomenon?
What's needed is education, more engagement. When it comes to law enforcement, is giving them the knowledge to identify anti-Semitic hate crimes, what qualifies as anti-Semitism, to give them good definitions, to help them understand examples of anti-Semitic hate crimes, so that they can enforce laws on the books and help them in their investigations that can lead to arrests and then prosecutions.
So perhaps you can also comment on the Trump administration's policies with regards to combating anti-Semitism on college campuses, what we're seeing now. Is this the right course of action in your view?
I think it's important to note when it comes to the United States that what the Trump administration is doing is enforcing Title VI regulations, which prohibit discrimination on the basis of religion, race, and ethnicity on college campuses. And here again, there are laws on the books and they just need to be enforced. And this administration is pushing harder than the previous administration in enforcing those laws.
And so are you optimistic for the future of diaspora Jewry?
I don't think that the threat should be overstated. That's why we use the data that we have to try to paint as accurate a picture of the situation as possible. And that's in many of the cases when we interact with leaders in Jewish communities abroad, they stress that while the situation is bad and that it has increased in different areas, that there is a threat, that Jewish life still exists, it still goes on, it still is protected. There just needs to be more enforcement from law enforcement and government and to apply the laws that are on the books.
Absolutely. All right, Dr. Carl Yonker, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you very much.